What's going on, Headliner Nation? Kyle back with the Fantasy Headliners, and it's time for my Week 6 Waiver Wire show. Who should you be targeting to get your team ready for next week? We've got 4 teams on a bye. We've had continued issues with teams potentially missing games and if they're going to play, and hopefully we're starting to put some of that in the past and behind us. But you have to be vigilant on the waiver wire. For those of you that don't have a win or maybe only have 1 or 2 wins this year, it's not quite over yet. All right, get on the waiver wire, grab some of these players. Some of those teams that are boasting winning records right now, they might be a little complicit. They might be like, you know what, I've got this on lockdown. It doesn't matter. Maybe they are not paying as much attention to the waiver wire as they need, and it's going to let some of these guys slip through to you. So get ready to put in some fab bids, to put in your waiver wire claims, whatever it may be. I've got a lot of guys that you should be taking a look at, and we're going to kick it off by starting with running backs. All right, I'm not going to beat around the bush. My Manscaped must add this week is going to be Chase Edmonds of the Arizona Cardinals. Don't forget, we are sponsored by Manscaped. So if you head over to manscaped.com and use code word headliners, you get 20% off any of their great products. Remember, manscaped.com, code word headliners, all capital letters, and you get 20% off all their great products. Chase Edmonds is going to be a must-have for me because, well, Kenyon Drake just hasn't held up his end of the bargain yet this year. Yeah, he ended up scoring that short touchdown yesterday, which really helped, get his fantasy points where you needed them to be, but it could have been a lot better. Chase Edmonds overall has looked much more efficient than Kenyon Drake, and I'm officially worried now that Kenyon Drake is going to be losing his starting job to Chase Edmonds. Now, over the last couple of weeks, people have been asking me, Kyle, should I be adding Chase Edmonds? And I've been telling you yes, especially in PPR leagues, because he's been getting some targets over the last couple of weeks. Well, this weekend, he gets 8 total touches for 92 yards and a touchdown. He had 6 targets on the day, so they are 100% utilizing him in the passing game. But if Kenyon Drake can't start being more efficient and Chase Edmonds continues to play the way he has been, he's going to start getting more of those touches on the ground as well. Heck, if he takes Kenyon Drake's job as a whole, Chase Edmonds might be a high-end running back to the rest of the season. So we need to be adding him now, especially if you are a Kenyon Drake owner. You need to get him on your team right away, because if you don't, you could be losing another running back really soon. My next target this week is going to be J.D. McKissic from the Washington football team, under 1% owned, going up against the New York Giants next week. Right now, McKissic has 20 targets over the last 3 games. Those are pretty good numbers for a pass-catching back. They are really looking to utilize him in the pass-catching game. And even though Antonio Gibson is the starting running back right now, McKissic continues to get the volume in the passing game. So if you're in a PPR league, maybe even in a half PPR league, you could grab McKissic pretty cheap this week. And since we have 4 teams on a bye, and if we have any other issues with testing, you'll be able to toss him into the flex and at least get some fantasy points for him. So go ahead and take a look at him as well. And again, who will be the next QB? It sounds like Kyle Checkdown King Allen will still be the starting quarterback moving forward. And if he is, McKissic is going to see plenty of volume to be started in the flex position for PPR leagues. Damian Harris, 45% owned. New England, again, not playing this week. However, that might take him off the radar of some people. He's 45% owned right now, so he qualifies to be on the show because you have to be under 50%. But whenever you pick up a New England Patriots player, especially a running back, you just don't know what you're going to get yourself into. So I don't highly encourage you to go get Damian Harris. Yeah, he did have 100 yards and 17 attempts the last time they were out on the field, but we don't know moving forward. Maybe Rex Burkhead gets a game one day, and then Sony Michel, and then James White, and it could be a rotation at all times. But again, if you need a running back, you don't have a whole lot of options, you might as well add him because it definitely looks like they want to start utilizing more and more often. And then Alexander Madison, Dalvin Cook, going for an MRI today, left the field yesterday, went to the locker room, tried to come back out, and Dalvin Cook could be dealing with an injury issue now. Looked like it may have been a growing, but we'll continue to keep an eye on that. But Alexander Madison, who is owned in less than 10% of fantasy leagues right now and gets the Atlanta Falcons next week, I would definitely be adding Alexander Madison this week as well. Again, especially for Dalvin Cook owners. If you're a Dalvin Cook owner, you have to get Alexander Madison on your team. Will Cook end up being okay? Again, we'll continue to monitor that. But on the ground, last week, Madison filling in goes 20 for 112 on the ground and 3 for 24 in the air. So still a good week for him. If he ends up being the starting running back for the next couple of weeks, if Cook has to work his way back from an injury, Alexander Madison is going to be right around running back 1 territory. All right, jumping into wide receivers now. And my first one comes from the Atlanta Falcons. And I couldn't pronounce his name on the live show on Saturday, but I've been practicing. Olamide Zaccheaus is my first person to be taking a look at for wide receivers. Under 1% owned right now, going up against Minnesota next week. How long is Julio going to be banged up for? Now, I'm not running out to add Zaccheaus in all of my leagues. But if you're a Julio owner, if you're a Gage owner that's tired of trying to deal with him, maybe just take a quick peek at Zaccheaus. Again, deeper leagues where you have a larger bench, dealing with a lot of injuries, whatever it may be, he's still a guy that you could potentially pick up because if Julio's out next week, you could put Zaccheaus in, and you never know. Could end up having a decent day and get you at least a few points so you don't have to take a 0 and risk it on somebody else who is far more ineffective. Number 2, Tyler Johnson from Tampa Bay, 0.1% owned, going up against Green Bay this coming week. Last week against Chicago, has 6 targets, 4 receptions, and 61 receiving yards. Chris Godwin is still out. All right, Scotty Miller was banged up this past week. And also, Mike Evans, not quite 100% as of yet. He had that ankle heavily taped the other day. And Tyler Johnson kind of comes out of nowhere. Now, if you're into the dynasty scene and you pay attention to college players, you probably knew a little bit more about Tyler Johnson. And honestly, it's taken some injuries for him to break out and finally have a decent game. Now, when everybody starts getting healthy and back, Tyler Johnson, maybe he takes over for Scotty Miller. Maybe he plays in the slot a little bit more. Maybe they put him on the outside to keep Chris Godwin in the slot a little bit more. We'll have to wait and see. But when Chris Godwin is out, Tyler Johnson is going to have an opportunity. Christian Kirk from Arizona, 42% owned, just barely checking in under that 50% mark that we need him to. Christian Kirk last week goes 7 targets, 5 receptions, 78 yards against the New York Jets. Now it's the New York Jets, right? Nothing to write home about there. But he is averaging 5.25 targets per game this year. So Christian Kirk has really kind of solidified himself as that number 2 option in Arizona, right behind DeAndre Hopkins. So when Arizona finds him in a situation where they do need to be passing a lot, Christian Kirk is a guy that is keeping an eye on that flex type availability, maybe even a wide receiver 3 type of week every single week with those targets coming his way. T. Higgins somehow is still under 50% owned, which kind of caught me off guard. 24% owned right now, gets Indianapolis this coming week. He's averaging 7.5 targets per game over the last 4 weeks. AJ Green looks like he is done in Cincinnati. He doesn't want anything to do with that team right now. Was barely giving any effort this past week. I'm off AJ Green 100%. I've had him as a sit. I had him as a sit last week. I did have him as a buy low target a couple of weeks ago, but that has not translated into any type of production. T. Higgins has solidified himself as the wide receiver 2 on that team. And of course, Cincinnati's throwing the ball 100 times a game right now, it seems like. So T. Higgins is continuing to see a decent amount of volume. Travis Fulgham from Philadelphia, 0% owned, and he gets a tough matchup going up against Baltimore this coming week. But over the last 2 weeks, he has 12 receptions on 16 targets, 209 yards, and 2 touchdowns. For wide receiver needy teams, he's definitely a guy that you should be adding right now because he's seeing a decent amount of volume. Now, when Alshon Jeffrey gets back, when Deshaun Jackson gets back, okay, when Jalen Reagor gets back, when all these guys end up getting healthy, more than likely Fulgham is not going to be a guy that we'll use after that. He's not going to be a guy that will command that much targets. However, Zach Ertz has been basically a no-show all season long. Dallas Goedert going out. Thought maybe that might help Zach Ertz, but it hasn't. He is not the number 1 target on that team right now. The last couple of weeks, it's been falling on him. So keep an eye on him and add him up now. Maybe we can use him over the next couple of weeks while we wait on the rest of the team to get healthy. Chase Claypool, only 3.7% owned. Is he becoming the wide receiver 2 there in Pittsburgh? It was Deontay Johnson to start the year. Heck, Deontay Johnson was number 2 in targets in the NFL after a couple of weeks to start the season. Big Ben was looking his way quite often, but Chase Claypool brings in a massive amount of touchdowns last week, but he's still a little boomer bust for me. He's had 2 really good games this year, and he's had 2 subpar games this year. To me, really, it depends on Deontay Johnson. Deontay Johnson was hurt twice last week. He left the field twice last week with injuries. Because of that, it allowed Claypool a little bit more work on the outside. And we know Big Ben loves to go to his receivers on the outside there. If Deontay Johnson continues to be injured, then Chase Claypool is a guy that, you should be adding, and we'll be able to start soon. Now, next week, I don't know. We'll keep an eye on it. He does get Cleveland next week, so there is a potential that I put him as a start, but a lot of it is going to depend on Deontay Johnson and his health. I'm still looking to add him, though, especially for wide receiver needy teams that have a little bit of low-end performances. If you need some high upside performance on your team, then Chase Claypool is the guy to add. Nelson Aguilar from Las Vegas called it on my start and sit video. I had him as a start, and I said, this feels like a big TD game for Nelson Aguilar. I think he could go deep, and that could make his day, and that's exactly what happened. Nailed that one on the head. He is on a bye going into this week. However, over the last 2 games, 6 receptions on 6 targets, 111 yards, and 2 touchdowns. So he's starting to kind of cement himself as one of the big play threats there. Henry Ruggs also had a big day this past week, and that win against the Kansas City Chiefs. But Aguilar, I'm looking to add him a little bit more right now just because I think he could be a little bit more of a consistent option over Henry Ruggs. Also on a bye heading into next week is Tre'Quan Smith. Now, as of this recording, they have not played Monday Night Football as of yet. But that is all the more reason to keep an eye on him, because if he has another good performance on Monday Night Football with no Michael Thomas, we really need to bring Tre'Quan Smith in. Prior to Monday Night Football, over the last 3 games, Tre'Quan Smith has 13 receptions on 17 targets, 182 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Even when Michael Thomas comes back, Tre'Quan Smith could be that wide receiver 2 to him. It could be Michael Thomas, Alvin Kamara, and then Tre'Quan Smith at that point. Jared Cook has been hurt, and when he hasn't been hurt, he's been basically ineffective. Emmanuel Sanders has done a little bit this season, but nothing spectacular, nothing that makes him a start, nothing that we have to pick him up and add him to that lineup. Tre'Quan Smith has been the guy that's looked a whole lot better. He's got a little bit more big playability than what Emmanuel Sanders has. He has a lot more big playability than what Jared Cook has. Definitely could be a guy that still has wide receiver 3 type volume and production, even when Michael Thomas comes back. So again, heading into the bye, kind of like I've talked with some of the other people, when they head into the bye, they might be overlooked a little bit, but that just means we could get them for a little bit of a cheaper price. Also, 2 players from Jacksonville to keep in mind. Keelan Cole and Laviska Shenault. Both of these guys under 50% owned right now. Keelan Cole 16%, Shenault 31%, going up against Detroit next week. And some of this is going to depend on DJ Chark. Left last week with an injury. How banged up is he? He was banged up prior to this game, was fine in week 4, week 5, a little bit banged up again. What are we going to see in week 6? Right now with Keelan Cole, he has 3 touchdowns in 5 games this year, and he has at least 5 targets in every single game. So he continues to be more of that deep threat. Now, when DJ Chark missed a couple of weeks ago, we thought Keelan Cole would be in a smash position, and that didn't happen. Was it the play of Gardner Minshew that kind of dictated that? Was it Keelan Cole just basically showing, hey, if I don't have Chark helping take the pressure off on the other side, I'm not really that big of a threat? So maybe something to monitor next week. If Chark ends up being out, maybe Keelan Cole isn't the guy that we want to be picking up. But again, he's had decent production so far this year. And if Chark is over there, he gets the cornerback too, and he doesn't get nearly as much eyes on him. which allows a little bit better production. Shenault doesn't have nearly the big playability that what Keelan Cole has. He does lack some of that touchdown upside, but over the last 3 games, he has he's averaging 6 targets. So he's still getting a decent amount of volume. We're just waiting to see a little bit more of that big playability come out. Again, Cole's going to be more of that deep threat, and then Chenault's going to be more of that volume type possession receiver that really could help out in PPR leagues. I've really only got 3 tight ends to be taking a look at this week. And I appreciate the game that Robert Tonyan had a couple of weeks ago. I really do. That week I had him listed as a waiver wire pickup. I had him listed as a start in my start sit video, and I had him as a top 15 tight end, which he outperformed anyway in my rankings videos. And he performed so well that all of you yelled at me when you didn't see him on the videos this past week. Well, why didn't you see him on last week's waiver wire video? He was over 50% owned, just like he is this week. So he's not here again. Why didn't you see him in the start sit videos and the ranking videos last week? Because he was on a bye. I got yelled at because there was a player on a bye not in my rankings. That's how good he was. So just to clarify, no, Robert Tonyan is not on this waiver wire video because he's over 50% owned. So no, I'm not including him. So who is under 50% owned that we can take a look at? Let's start with Cameron Brate. Actually, all 3 of these guys are under 1% owned in fantasy leagues right now. 0.3% for Cameron Brate, 0.6% for Darren Fells, and 0.1% for Trey Burton. For Cameron Drake, kind of the same thing when I talked about Johnson. There's a lot of injuries right now in Tampa Bay. Chris Godwin is out. Scotty Miller was banged up last week. Mike Evans not 100%. OJ Howard done for the season. Rob Gronkowski just hasn't been himself. Cameron Brate is looking like a potential red zone threat, touchdown threat every single week. So if you're looking for something in your tight end spot and you're like, I just need to grab somebody that could score potentially, Cameron Brate might have more touchdown upside than any non-elite tight end in the league right now, because Tom Brady is going to be looking towards him in the red zone each and every game when Chris Godwin isn't there. And again, Mike Evans being banged up helps out a little bit, and Gronkowski not being himself makes Brate a true red zone threat. Darren Fells from Houston this past week I had Akins listed as a start. He ends up going out. I quick right before game time, grab Fells, move him way up in my rankings, and listed as a start, and had a big game. If Akins continues to be out, this is just going to leave to more opportunities for Fells. And seeing that offense this past week running a little bit better. Brandon Cooks finally getting involved. Fells getting involved. We'll have to see what it is moving forward. But Fells is definitely a guy with no Akins, could see more than enough volume because Watson has been looking towards his tight ends this season. And Trey Burton from Indianapolis. Indianapolis has been a little bit like a carousel at the tight end position. To begin the season, we were all over Jack, Mother, and Doyle. Jack Doyle goes down, then we're all over Mo Cox, Mo Problems. Well, Mo Cox, Mo Problems had Trey Burton come back from injury and Jack, Mother, and Doyle come back from injury. And now all of a sudden the Colts are looking to Trey Burton to be that tight end. Why? Because over the last couple of weeks, Trey Burton has the most snaps played of any tight end in Indianapolis. He also has 11 targets the last 2 games. Mo Cox, Mo Problems, he only had 1 target last game. Definitely looks like they are trying to get Trey Burton into the game plan, get him flowing, and using him as a definite receiving weapon for Phillip Rivers. And Mo Cox, Mo Problem, it might, moving forward, only be a guy that really brings some red zone opportunity. So Trey Burton might be a guy to take a look at as well if you're really needing some help at tight end this week. All right, moving into the streaming portion of this video, talking about quarterbacks and defensive special teams that we can stream for week 6. Number 1, first and foremost, obviously Andy Dalton. Dak Prescott absolutely killed me to see him go down with that injury this week, and I know it did a lot of people. So hoping that he gets fully healed and back and ready to play sooner rather than later. Oh man, it was a killer. Not because the video was sick, but because as a Dak Prescott fan and a guy that's been pushing him for a few years now, hate to see that, but I hate to see it with anybody. So Andy Dalton, definitely a guy that we'll be taking a look at. Any super flex league, any 2 QB league, you're burning whatever fab you have left. You get Andy Dalton on your team right now. At worst, low-end quarterback one the rest of the season, especially with the weapons that he has there. Kirk Cousins from Minnesota going up against Atlanta this coming week. Atlanta allows the most fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks, so he'll be a guy that definitely could help out with a little bit of upside this week. Took him a little bit of time against Seattle. Still had a pretty good game. We'll probably have a decent game going up against Atlanta as well. And Joe Flacco. Who would have thought we'd be talking about Joe Flacco in 2020? Here we are in week 6, going up against Miami, who allows the 6th most fantasy points per game. Joe Flacco, again, another streaming option for those of you who may be desperate. But if you're desperate enough to start Joe Flacco, maybe your season is over with already. Only 2 streaming options to look at for defensive special teams this week, and those are the defenses that are going up against teams that are allowing the most fantasy points to opposing defenses this year, and that's going to be Miami and Washington. Miami's going up against the New York Jets, Washington going up against the New York Giants. So the New York teams are allowing opposing defenses in fantasy football to put up some pretty big points. That's based off turnovers. That's based off defensive touchdowns, holding teams to minimum scores, things of that nature. So those are going to be my 2 options this week. Miami 1.1% owned going up against the Jets. They'll be fairly easy to grab. Washington 12.8% owned. They might be still held on to by quite a few people with the way they began the season and how Chase Young was on fire to start the year. So they might still be held on to by a few people, but under 13% owned going up against the Giants. So those are the 2 teams that if you need to stream a defensive or special team this week, they're definitely the ones that I'm taking a shot at. There you have it, Headliner Nation. Your waiver wire video for week 6. Get out there and get set. Throw some fab money out there. Throw some waiver wire claims out there. Whatever you need to do, get ready for week 6. And again, for those of you that are trailing a little bit in your fantasy leagues right now, don't worry. Work the waiver wire this week. Grab some of these guys. We can turn it around rather quickly. So Headliner Nation, do me a favor, hit that like button down below if you appreciate all the content. If there's somebody you didn't see on this video that you're thinking about picking up, let me know in the comments. And also, hit that subscribe button. If you're new to the Fantasy Headliners, become a part of Headliner Nation today. Thanks so much for tuning into this video. Headliner Nation, stay safe, stay healthy, be kind to each other, and I'll catch you on the next episode of the Fantasy Headliners.